Hameed Hakimi is a research associate at Chatham House and he joins me now from Cambridge in the UK. Good to have you on the show, sir. Thanks very much for joining me. Kabul is increasingly surrounded. What are your thoughts right now?
Good morning. My thoughts are actually mainly with all those people I've met over the years in Kabul that I speak to, and they're very concerned. They're civilians. And I think it's a moment of absolute dire hopelessness for a lot of Afghans. And it didn't have to be this way, not because the Afghans are, in favor of some kind of permanent foreign occupation force, if we use the term, but because it's just in the way that their lives have been decided for them by the bigger players here, the United States, also the fact that their government under President Ashraf Ghani failed to read the mood and either prepare for a transfer of power or concede more to the Taliban, or convince the United States to not have taken the steps that the United States did. So a lot of confusion, a lot of hopelessness, and a lot of despair as to who to blame. And that's the kind of message I'm getting from the people that I speak to.
The Biden administration's argument for withdrawal, even in the face of these Taliban gains, is that Afghan security is not in the national interest of the US, that it's no longer a counter-terrorism priority. Do you think that's a correct assessment, and how do you think Afghans feel about that?
I believe it's a contradictory statement to, we should not have such short memory about, the history. I think one of the tragedies that we have is that, in places like Afghanistan, people who are still suffering from the 1979 period, the Soviet invasion, and that ripple effect. Remember, this conflict for the Afghans is over 40 years old. It didn't begin with 9/11 for them. There, people are very much aware and they follow what they hear from the intervening forces, such as the United States. So they obviously see the Afghans a full contradiction here, because that's not what the administration of President Bush said. That's not what President Obama was doing when, for example, just an example, they spent hundreds of millions of US dollar taxpayer money into a program called, I think, Promote, and it was to do with gender equality promotion in Afghanistan. So it really goes against all of those kinds of things that the United States have done in Afghanistan. So the fact that suddenly now you change course and try and change narrative in Washington by the Biden administration to say it actually wasn't really about state building, it wasn't really about the Afghans, then to the Afghans that seems like a clear contradiction. But also I must say that for us sitting in the UK, the United Kingdom has been involved in Afghanistan with the United States since 2001, and there are a lot of developmental, humanitarian, but also government stakeholders who feel incredibly disheartened, and they're disappointed with the way that the Biden administration has gone out and done this. And again, nobody is saying that the alternative should have been a permanent stay of the United States. The alternative should have been a more orderly, actually a promise the United States made itself, which was that nothing was agreed until everything was agreed. That's actually what Zalmay Khalilzad said, the current envoy of the US for peace.
How much, though, of an inevitability is the Taliban push? Have they just been waiting, that they have time, and they've had time for the last 20 years? How much of an assessment have many of the military strategic advisors have said, well, listen, this is classic guerrilla warfare, they have outrun us in terms of time, and this is just a matter of an inevitability?
I think the Taliban have defeated every stakeholder that was fighting them, for sure, because they planned for this, they planned for all the scenarios. There is, if like me, you were immersed in the following of various narratives in different languages, it's very clear that they had a PR strategy. They stayed on message. The Taliban have been the only party to this conflict that actually has stayed on message throughout, largely speaking, despite making deals, despite making political concessions here and there, and despite waiting. I think what you see in the United States, people who talk about these various types of scenarios and plannings. You know, it shows a complete disconnect with the reality of Afghan lives and the reality of Afghanistan. But it equally points to, I think, a dismal failure of political leadership in Afghanistan, as a result of which large segments of society, almost all country today in Afghanistan, are very, very uncertain, very unsure, and scared about their future. And just to give you a very quick background, you know, in this current phase of violence, that is the resurgence of the Taliban taking over provincial capitals, you have nearly 250,000 people displaced. That's according to the UN, internally. Anywhere in the world, that number of people displaced, you know, would cause a humanitarian catastrophe and be the lead story. And here we are, unfortunately, for rightful reasons. I understand why. But when I speak to the Afghans, they don't understand it. That in the media, we only hear the messaging from the US, the contradictory, the very dismal PR exercise. You just have to go see the Twitter account of the US Embassy in Kabul. I mean, which world do they live in? It's very, very sad for the Afghans, and the civilians I speak to are incredibly terrified. But, you know, I really hope that if anything, I really hope that the political process would lead to a prevention of urban warfare, because Afghan cities have changed in the last 20 years. That's one major story of the last 20 years.
Yeah,
Afghan cities have been large, and there would be a humanitarian catastrophe of beyond belief if there is a warfare street to street in Kabul and places like Kabul, which will have dire consequences for all of us as humanity.
And let's see what happens. We are hearing that perhaps Ashraf Ghani will speak. What that means and when that'll happen, we'll of course bring that to you here on CNN. Hameed Hakimi, thank you very much for joining us, giving us your perspective from Chatham House.
Thank you very much for having me.